Look anxiously at this photograph. It was taken in 1895 on the outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts. This simple angel conceals one of the best advancing belief anytime accurate about an American family. The adventure that remained active for over an eon until a fresh, credible abstracts arise secrets that would accomplish anyone lose sleep. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to ascertain about the Blackwood abode will consistently change how you appearance old photographs. This DeGera blazon photograph, one of the Aboriginal accurate techniques of the 19th century, was begin in 2019 in the Salem Badge Department archives. For decades it remained filed as affirmation from a case that was never solved. The abode you're seeing belonged to the Blackwood family, one of the wealthiest and best affecting families in New England during the backward 19th century. Built in 1847 by Nathaniel Blackwood, an affluent aroma merchant who fabricated his affluence in barter with the Orient, the abode had 47 rooms, including a basement that continued far above the band of the Capitol structure. But it wasn't the admeasurement of the acreage that bent the authorities' absorption in 1895. It was what they begin inside. Observe the Gothic Revival architectonics archetypal of the era with its acicular building and angled windows. But there's article advancing about the building's symmetry. Apprehension how some windows arise to accept been boarded up from the inside, creating an aberrant arrangement that suggests modifications fabricated afterwards the Aboriginal construction. These alterations, as we would afterwards discover, were not fabricated for artful reasons. Nathaniel Blackwood was accepted in Salem as a religious and admirable man, affiliated to Eleanor Ashford, babe of a acceptable Puritan family. They had 7 accouchement amid 1850 and 1863, but there's article, aberrant in the ancestors' annal that was alone credible afresh by genealogists investigating the Blackwood lineage. Of the 7 accouchement with accurate bearing certificates, alone 3 arise in the city's academy records. The added 4 artlessly abolished from official abstracts afterwards their Aboriginal years. There are no afterlife records, no acknowledgement of them in wills or ancestors' correspondence. It's as if they never existed afterwards, a assertive age. The earlier son, Theodore Blackwood, became a doctor and alternate to animate in the ancestors' abode in 1872, afterwards admission from Harvard University. His diaries, credible alone in 1987 during acreage renovations, arise advancing accommodation about activity central that house. Theodore wrote about all important abstracts and the adorable assignment he performed in the mansion's basement. Elelena Blackwood, the ancestors' matriarch, developed the appropriate acceptability in town. Neighbors arise that she was rarely credible during the day, but her silhouettes could be empiric walking through the acreage breadth in the Aboriginal hours of dawn. She was frequently credible talking to herself, or at atomic, that's what the neighbors thought. Abstracts begin afterwards. Beforehand, she wasn't alone in those nocturnal conversations. In 1889, 6 years before this photograph was taken, aberrant rumors began circulating about the Blackwood Mansion. It all started aback Mary Patterson, an adolescent Irish woman assassin as a governess, mysteriously abolished afterwards alone 3 weeks of work. She had beatific a letter to her sister in Boston adage, she had credible article abhorrent in the abode and bear to leave immediately. The letter never able its destination. It was begin 127 years afterwards in 2016, central a bank of the abode during annihilation work. The letter's accommodation are disturbing. Mary wrote about screams advancing from below the apple during the night and about accouchement who shouldn't be alive. She mentioned seeing Theodore Blackwood demography bodies to the basement, bodies who never came back out. Afterwards, Mary's disappearance, the Blackwood ancestors chock-full hiring calm help. They became absolutely isolated, rarely accepting visitors or accommodating in Salem's amusing events. The bounded postman of the time, James Morrison, arise in his memoirs that correspondence to the abode had about ceased, except for medical bales that consistently accustomed for Theodore. These packages, according to abstracts from the Boston Pharmaceutical Company that beatific them, independent substances we would now admit as archaic anesthetics and chemicals for preservation. At the time, Theodore justified these purchases by claiming he was administering important medical assay for the beforehand of science. But conceivably the best advancing detail is this. Bounded Abbey annal appearance that the Blackwood ancestors chock-full accessory Sunday casework in 1890. Aback Abbey. William Hayes visited the abode to assay on the family's well-being. He was met at the aperture by Theodore, who claimed anybody was well. but that they had developed a new analysis of adoration they able at home. The abbey noticed an aberrant odor advancing from central the house, which Theodore explained as actuality from accurate experiments. On October 15, 1895, absolutely 3 weeks afterwards this photograph was taken, an abstruse blaze captivated allotment of the east accession of the Blackwood Mansion. The Salem Blaze Department, led by Captain Robert Sterling, responded bound to the call, but what they begin would change their lives forever. While angry the flames, the firefighters credible that the blaze had arise a abstruse access to the basement, a head hidden abaft an oak cabinet. Aback Sterling went bottomward to investigate. He began article that would abode him for the blow of his life. The basement continued far above the band of the Capitol House, basic and underground circuitous with assorted rooms. In his official notes, Sterling declared a class of abhorrence that defies any affable description. There were improvised operating tables, medical instruments covered in broiled blood, and bottle jars absolute specimens. But best advancing were the rooms. Baby beef with chains on the walls and harbinger on the attic as if advised to confine people. In one of the cells, Sterling began scratches on the bean walls. Marks that appeared to accept been fabricated by animal nails over abounding years. Theodore's medical annal begin on his board in the underground class, arise aberrant abstracts conducted on active animal beings. He anxiously accurate his attempts to prolong activity above accustomed band and to abstraction the furnishings of abiding affliction on the animal psyche. The addendum beforehand he saw his patients not as bodies but as assay material. Best abominable was the assay of a account kept by Elelanina Blackwood hidden in a apocryphal wall. Her entries arise that she not alone knew about her son's abstracts but actively encouraged them. She wrote about the accent of confined medical adeptness and how the offerings were all important for the greater good. The offerings, according to context, were attainable bodies the ancestors absorbed to the abode beneath apocryphal pretenses. A attendant assay conducted by Salem badge arise the advancing pattern. Amid 1872 and 1895 at atomic 23 bodies had mysteriously abolished in the region. Best of them adolescent women from poor families or immigrants who formed as domestics. What fabricated these disappearances alike added adverse was the actuality that abounding of the victims had aftermost been credible in the about of the Blackwood Mansion. Margaret O. Sullivan, a 19-year-old Irish woman, was credible walking adjoin the abode in March 1891. Her sister, accustomed to letter 3 canicule later, allegedly from Margaret, added she had begun an able job and not to worry. The letter's handwriting, analyzed decades later, did not bout Margaret's. Experts bent it had been accounting by an able woman, possibly Elelanina Blackwood. This assay led board to check added correspondence from missing victims, absolute a constant arrangement of artificial belletrist advised to calm afraid families. Thomas Chen, a adolescent Chinese immigrant who formed at Salem's docks, was aftermost credible in August 1893, accustomed his accoutrement to join the mansion. His wife had accustomed a bulletin that Theodore Blackwood bear burning aliment on the acreage and would pay abundantly for the work. Thomas never alternate home. The arrangement was consistently the same. Attainable people, usually afterwards continued ancestors in the region, were absorbed to the abode with promises of advantageous work. Already inside, they artlessly disappeared. Families accustomed artificial belletrist answer abrupt departures and eventually chock-full searching. Theodore Blackwood's medical diaries, accounting in accurate handwriting, acknowledge a ablaze apperception besmirched by obsession, accelerating from Harvard Medical Academy in 1871. He had advised the works of antecedents in anesthesia and surgery, but his interests anon angry to abundant darker territories. In his aboriginal notes, Theodore expresses annoyance with the ethical limitations imposed by acceptable medicine. He believed that accurate advances could alone be able through abstracts that hypocritical association would never approve. Gradually, his addendum appearance coast into carelessness or conceivably the adumbration of an already besmirched nature. The abstracts accurate in his affidavit are too advancing to call in detail, but circuitous attempts to accumulate victims acquainted during abiding surgical procedures, studies on the band of animal pain, and aberrant attempts to abate a sleep tissue. Theodore anxiously accurate his victims' reactions, alleviative their screams and pleas as admired accurate data. One decidedly advancing access anachronous, June 12, 1894, describes an agreement breath Theodore attempted to accumulate a victim animate for 17 canicule afterwards, academician anaplasty afterwards anesthesia. He abstracts with analytic aloofness how the victim went through altered stages of cerebral trauma. Eventually accident the adeptness to allege but advancement alertness until the end. Elena Blackwood was not an acquiescent observer. Her own account reveals that she saw her son's abstracts as adorable assignment destined to beforehand animal knowledge. She frequently watched the procedures and sometimes appropriate improvements to the methods. In one abominable entry, she writes about how the victim's screams reminded her of adorable songs, and how she acquainted adored to attestant the CD of these bodies in the name of science. Now, let's about face our absorption back to this photograph. A backboard advised it with accumulative lenses in 1895. They fabricated advancing discoveries that weren't arresting to the naked eye, attending afresh at the third attic window on the right. That adumbration that seemed like a comedy of a blaze and adumbration is a rise beneath deepening to be acutely a animal figure. But that's not the best advancing part. If you attending anxiously at the added windows, you can apprehension anemic faces watching from the autogenous darkness. A say of the photograph arise at atomic 6 altered abstracts in the mansion's windows. Some arise to be apprenticed to join the bottle as if aggravating to escape. Later, assay appropriate these weren't caligenosity or defects from archaic photography, but absolute bodies captured by the continued acknowledgement all important in 1895 photography. Best advancing is that a back badge assuredly entered the abode afterwards the fire. They begin affirmation that bodies had been kept on the high floors of the house, not aloof in the basement. Chains were begin in several apartment and some apartment windows had been closed from the inside. Authoritative escape impossible. Avant-garde argumentative assay of this photograph conducted in 2003 application agenda technology arise alike, added advancing details. Acute enlargements appearance that some of the abstracts in the windows arise to be in avant-garde states of deterioration, suggesting Theodore kept his victims animate beneath atrocious altitude for abiding periods. A decidedly macabre assay was fabricated in the property's garden. ABAC experts advised the photograph for affirmation of artful burials. They noticed irregularities in the clay that appropriate assorted burying sites. Afterwards, excavations accepted these suspicions. Absolute the charcoal of at atomic 19 individuals. ABAC firefighters and badge accustomed at the abode that acute October night in 1895, they accepted to acquisition the Blackwood ancestors in charge of rescue. What they begin was actual different. Theodore Blackwood was credible in his underground laboratory, asleep from a self-inflicted anguish to the neck. Beside him was a syringe, absolute a actuality that afterwards assay articular as a baleful cocktail of opiates and poisons. His aftermost account entry, allegedly accounting account afore death, said only, "The assignment charge abide on accession alike of existence." Elena Blackwood was begin in what had already been the mansion's capital salon, sitting calmly in an armchair while bonfire captivated the abode about her. She was acquainted ABAC firefighters begin her but banned to leave the property. ABAC questioned about the horrors credible in the house. She artlessly smiled and said, "You don't accept the accent of what we able here." Eleanor was taken to Salem Hospital breath. She died 3 canicule afterwards, allegedly of accustomed causes. Nurses arise that she spent nights animate whispering to caligenosity and bedlam softly. On the morning of her death, she was begin with a serene smile on her face and the words, "They came for me," accounting in claret on the bank beside her bed. Best abstruse was the fate of the added Blackwood children. Nathaniel had died in 1881, but Annal adumbrated that at atomic 2 developed accouchements still lived in the mansion. During the search, badge begin clothes and claimed belongings, but no assurance of the occupants. It's as if they had artlessly vanished. The advancing approach emerged a backboard credible that Theodore's class-independent accessories for archaic cryogenics, attempts to bottle bodies at acutely low temperatures. Some brainstorm that Theodore may accept acclimated associates of his own ancestors as assay subjects, answer both the dematerialization of ancestors from official annal and the absence of bodies in the mansion. The acreage breadth the Blackwood abode already stood remained alone for decades afterwards the fire. The burgle of Salem declared the acreage of actual absorption in 1923. but no one was absorbed in affairs or developing it. Bounded association arise aberrant phenomena in the area. Light's actualization breadth the abode acclimated to be, sounds of screams advancing from underground, and apparitions of Victorian abstracts abnormality the grounds. In 1987, the University of Massachusetts conducted an archaeological blasting at the site. What they begin accepted bored affliction fears. In accession to the 19 bodies credible initially, charcoal of at atomic 31 added individuals were found, including children. Assay of the basic arise affirmation of acute agony, constant with medical experimentation. Several skeletons showed signs of trepidation, surgical holes in the skull performed while victims were still alive. Added basic credible absolute cuts suggesting anatomization of acquainted people. A decidedly advancing assay was fabricated in 2003. A back advisor's application arena, biting alarm articular underground structures, extending far above what had been originally discovered. Excavations arise a circuitous of tunnels abutting altered genitalia of the property, including an underground alcove that appeared to accept been acclimated for macabre rituals. In this chamber, archaeologists begin symbols carved into the beam walls. Not acceptable religious symbols, but assets that assume to certificate Theodore's experiments. The walls were covered with archaic representations of surgical procedures and animal abstracts in assorted stages of decomposition. The adventure of the Blackwood abode didn't end with Theodore and Elena's deaths. Avant-garde genealogical assay arise that the Blackwood ancestors had access to added baffling dematerialization cases throughout New England during the 19th century. Distant cousins of the ancestors were articular in Connecticut and Vermont. Breath agnate patterns of disappearances were accurate during the aforementioned period. An arising approach suggests there may accept existed a ancestors' arrangement of individuals circuitous in animal experimentation, administration adeptness, and possibly alike victims amid properties. Abstracts begin in Harvard University Athenaeum arise that Theodore wasn't the alone physician of the era absorbed in bent experimentation. A court amid Theodore and added doctors suggests the actuality of an abstruse association of medical professionals who believed accurate advance justified any means. This society, which alleged itself the illuminators of accurate science, allegedly maintained abundant annal of their abstracts and aggregate discoveries amid members. Annal beforehand, they had an arrangement of suppliers who kidnapped acceptable victims for their experiments. Best advancing is that affirmation suggests this association may accept survived able-bodied into the 20th century. Reports of disappearances with agnate patterns were accurate until the 1940s. Consistently involving attainable bodies dematerialization, afterwards acquaintance with admirable medical professionals. Alike afterwards added then an aeon of investigation, several aspects of the Blackwood abode adventure abide inexplicable. One of the best advancing questions is the fate of the Blackwood children, who abolished from official annal during childhood. Assay of ancestors' abstracts suggests that Nathaniel and Eleanor had 7 children, but alone Theodore and 2 daughters able adulthood, according to attainable records. What happened to the added 4 children? Theories ambit from undocumented baby afterlife to the advancing achievability that Theodore acclimated his own ancestors as assay accommodation from adolescent age. A 2007 assay afford new ablaze on this mystery. During renovations of the adjoining house, workers begin an ambuscade abode absolute children's toys and baby clothes dating to the 1860s. Added disturbingly, they begin baby animal basic hidden with the claimed objects. Argumentative assay bent the basic belonged to 4 altered children, all dead about ages 8 to 10. Affirmation of agony on the basic was constant with archaic medical experimentation. DNA extracted from the basic accepted the accouchement were related, possibly siblings. Accession advancing approach emerged to back advisors noticed inconsistencies in Elena Blackwood's own bearing records. Abstracts beforehand she may not accept been who she claimed to be. Immigration annal announce a altered Elena Ashford accession in the United States at the aforementioned time, but with an age that didn't bout the Elena who affiliated Nathaniel. This assay led some advisors to brainstorm that the absolute Elena Ashford may accept been one of the aboriginal victims with her character affected by addition added sinister. This approach would explain the credible transformation of an admirable Puritan babe into an abettor to medical atrocities. The assay of Theodore Blackwood's abstracts had a abstruse pulse on the development of avant-garde medical ethics. Theodore's affidavit were advised abundantly by medical belief committees and helped analysis the base of ethical codes administering medical assay today. The American Medical Association uses the Blackwood case as an acute archetype of how accurate attraction afterwards ethical limitations can advance to doubtful atrocities. Theodore's methods, admitting archaic by avant-garde standards, appearance awfully avant-garde compassionate of analysis and analysis that he acquired through analytical animal experimentation. Ironically, some of the discoveries accurate in Theodore's affidavit contributed to accepted medical advances. His addendum on acoustic reactions to affliction helped afterwards advisors advance added able anesthesia techniques. His observations on tissue canning contributed to avant-garde agency attention techniques. This advancing absoluteness raises circuitous ethical questions about how association should accord with adeptness acquired through about amiss means. Theodore's affidavit abide archived at Harvard's Medical Library, attainable alone to advisors with specific accreditation and ethical approval. The case additionally afflicted the development of avant-garde protocols for anecdotic-bent medical research. Warning signs articular in Theodore's behavior, amusing isolation, clandestineness about research, attrition to ethical blank are now accomplished in medical schools as indicators of accessible misconduct. Aback we attending afresh at this simple 1895 photograph, it becomes abundant added than an actual image. It's a certificate of animal horror, a window into one of the darkest accommodation in American medical history. Each adumbration in the windows represents an absent life. Each architectural detail hides secrets that remained hidden for generations. The Blackwood abode reminds us that the best alarming monsters are not abnormal creatures, but animal beings who accept absent all altruism in the name of abnormal obsessions. Theodore and Elenina Blackwood acclimated the advantages of their amusing position and advantaged apprenticeship to accomplish atrocities that baffle comprehension. Today, breadth the abode already stood, there is a lone and abandoned field. The burgle of Salem installed a baby canonizing applique in 1995. 100 years afterwards, the assay of the horrors. The applique artlessly mentions, in anamnesis of the victims of Blackwood Mansion, may their souls blow in peace. There's no acknowledgement of the Blackwoods themselves, as if the association adopted to balloon they existed. But conceivably it's important to remember, not to acclaim their crimes, but to never balloon that the accommodation. For angry exists oral humanity, generally hidden abaft admirable facades. The photograph you've credible today serves as a abiding admonition that appearances can deceive, and that the darkest secrets generally adumbrate abaft the windows of the best arty houses. The abutting time you attending at an old photograph, bethink the Blackwood Mansion. Ask yourself what belief are hidden in the shadows. What secrets the walls bouncer and what mysteries time has approved to bury. Because history is abounding of places like the Blackwood abode and their belief delay to be told. If this adventure absorbed you as abundant as it absorbed me to essay it, don't balloon to subscribe to the approach for added macabre actual mysteries like this one. We accept abounding added old photographs with advancing secrets cat and mouse to be revealed. Until the abutting investigation, break curious, but be accurate what you attending for in the caligenosity of the past. Please like, share, subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching.